So,
whatever you want to talk about.
a long time ago, decades ago, I think.
You've had only 3.
No shit. Decades ago, though. 2. You gave me this book.
I probably did, yeah.
This book's Compassion and Self-Hate.
Um,
I just want to talk about I guess the concept of self-hate,
oof,
just as a concept.
sure. Where it comes from, you mean?
Where it comes from, what may perpetuate it in people, the drivers, the after effects.
Yeah.
What you see. I mean, in my industry, obviously, my entire industry is driven by self-hate.
Yeah.
Fitness industry.
Sure. Yeah. You want to talk about?
Yeah.
You want to talk about the origins of self-hate?
Sure.
Oof. I mean, look, let's dispel the idea of reincarnation and carry over from another lifetime.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's going to be just trying to see in the mud.
Right.
But you can see where self-negating programs are instilled, invoked into the lives of young children by their parents. They do all kinds of horrible things that many times they don't even know that they're doing it. They don't realize that they are dealing with a brilliant biocomputer and they're programming at every moment. And it's not just an occasional thing, which I find some people to think, oh, this event. No, you're in an ocean of events. You're swimming in the water of events. It's a flow.
So you're saying it's not one particular instance that could create that aspect?
I'm not so sure as, no, I think one particular instance can have an enormous influence.
Okay.
But it very often that particular thing is just a signature of what's already been written.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Many small damages to the psyche of the infantile biocomputer, which is so sensitive. And then comes one event that represents them. And the little biocomputer eats it emotionally, but doesn't understand it, of course. And then later on, when the little biocomputer becomes a linguistic being, all the things said and in conjunction with what was done, you know, for instance, if a child is beaten and then called every name in the book while he's being beaten, all that becomes a deep program imprint. And let's not lie about it. And let's not be stupid, as some people have said, oh, it's in the past, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Are we that stupid? You're dealing with a piece of wax.
Right.
And everything that you do with it from moment to moment has an imprint on it. And if you give it love and love and love and love, and you make it sense, make the little biocomputer sense that he or she is significant and worthy of love, then you've got a different kind of thing. But if you have an instance where a child is a reflection of the parent's own self-negation, I want you to be this, even though I can never be that. Right. You have to be perfect. You have to not disturb me, too. You have to not bother me. You've got to be some kind of a facile little instrument that works for me. Basically, you're dealing with the idiocy, the stupidity, the bad consequences that come from a fundamental human selfishness. And it's not addressed enough, in my opinion. I could mention brilliant people who are talking, but they don't look at this fundamental problem that is human selfishness, because it's all, you know, we've spoken about it. It stands on all kinds of variations of separativeness. And separativeness from other people and separativeness from nature, obviously from God. There's no idea of God that's adequate. If it's a father or a mother, it's got to be thrown out. And it should be, because that's not adequate. But then they throw out the baby with the bathwater. They throw out the consciousness. They throw out the intelligence. They throw out the subatomic world full of mystery and magic and and miraculous, it seems. They throw a whole thing out because what they think that they've reduced God to some kind of person, and because they can disprove the person in their mind, they should, then obviously there's nothing else. Really? There's no intelligence? But anyway, yeah, I don't mean to just be blaming the parents. The conditions of the world too are pretty terrible. And if a child is brought up in a culture, even where the parents are good, the child can become paranoid as a result of having to go out and fight with all kinds of people. And I can name various cultures where that's very prevalent, if you want. And so what happens, and this is in my brief description of your inquiry, what happens once these programs are established, they have a tendency to absorb other programs. It's like a big wheel, and any time it gets something else in its vortex and its cyclonic spin, where it sucks in various behaviors from other people that will reinforce the primary program. So you think you have free will and all that. There's this thing going on with a lot of people. I know this sounds awfully cynical and pessimistic, doesn't it? Because it basically means you're in the hands of the devil, which is unfortunately what a lot of the ancients always thought. That to live in this world, like the Gnostics, they believe this world is created by an evil demon called a demiurge. They could look at it. Look at whatever is in the effect was in the cause. And so that's how they would think. And the real purpose of life is to get out of this, to escape this, like Buddhism. And that's what they really thought that Christianity was, because they said it got distorted by the bishops who wanted to maintain power. You have to go through us, and now we established the dogma. And the dogma for the bishops in the Council of Nicaea 326, the dogma was characterized by them reducing Christianity to the cult of the personality. And therefore dispensing people, number one, of their need to save themselves in a sense of where they're drowning, but also where they become their saviors. And it just becomes a one more absurd movement in the life of material existence, where it just continues to be like this world as it is. I called it once a slaughterhouse, and somebody objected to it. Really? Take a look. Take a look right now in this world, what's happening. It was said in the Gurdjieff work, and certainly I didn't need to hear it, that if you could see everything that's going on in the world right now, it would kill you.
Right.
If you have any heart.
So, we're stuck.
Good.
Is everyone bound to an existence filled with self-hate?
You're going to have to ask somebody who's wise and who's transcendent about that. I'm not going to pontificate about a condition that I have not achieved. I'm not going to bullshit anybody watching. All I know is that you can become aware of this, and it would be nice if at some point, maybe a tipping point, where you make there's something that happens. You could call it a decision, but it's a decision made and it announces it through you. Let's not take credit.
An occurrence.
Yeah, I mean you're responsible.
Right.
But the hell with all the stuff about the guilt and everything. Let's throw that out, because that doesn't do any good. But you are responsible. Like if you're on the roof on a windy day and you're falling off the roof, who's responsible for saving you?
Right.
Yourself. Does it involve guilt? No, not per se.
Right.
And people don't understand that. I've had to debate that with people whose intellects are that big.
It's a level of objectivity.
Well, people like to think in terms of right and wrong and guilt and black and white. That's easy for the idiots. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But you can do all kinds of things with what we're talking about. You can go into philosophies of ethics. You can look at Kant and the categorical imperative. You can look at utilitarianism. You can look at all the different systems, as I have when I was lucky enough to teach all this. But it really always comes back down to understanding as deeply as you can your condition. And I think that's dangerous for some of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we had just an intellectual understanding of the fact that we're so badly programmed, that could lead to a very disastrous decision.
Mm.
Some people say, oh, the hell with this, boom.
Mm.
So I'm not trying to encourage anything.
Mm-hmm.
But if anybody who watches this is inclined to be self-observant, already doing what Krishnamurti says do, he always appeals to the people who are already doing it.
Of course.
Then do it and see what happens. Don't look to me to be a teacher. Like Krishnamurti has said, you do that, you destroy me in your eyes. You'll rip me down off the pedestal. I'm not your teacher. And then by doing that, you'll destroy yourself because you will give up on anything and anybody. You will not believe.
Mm-hmm.
It'll destroy your faith, your hope, whatever it is that drives you to try to continue. A lot of people fall by the wayside, like the failed romantic.
Mm-hmm.
You try to have love, and then, you know, as with a lot of people, the person fails enough, and then it's just a kind of promiscuity.
Mm-hmm.
That was mentioned in a very good movie, The Year of Living Dangerously, a Mel Gibson movie when he first appeared, and the little Helen, what's her name, and she played a man, and spectacular, great movie. Quotes from St. Paul and the Bhagavad Gita, things like that. A wonderful movie, done very, very long time ago. And the woman who played a man, she played like a facilitator of goodness, and she made a comment to herself. There was a running commentary done by her as she observed. He was dedicated to just helping people in need, family. In Indonesia, this is in Indonesia. And I won't destroy the end of it, but it's a movie worth watching. It's full of resonating perennial ideas. And
what was the name of it one more time?
The Year of Living Dangerously. Sigourney Weaver, one of her first. Mel Gibson, and then the little Helen, what's her name? She's got a TV program where she plays a director of like a CIA thing or something like that. You know.
I'll have to find it after.
But it was done extremely well, and I don't. But anyway, that was mentioned in there, and you can just see all the stuff that goes on. And one of the comments was the failed romantic, and that's just basically somebody looking for love, and then giving the body to love, and then after a while there's no love, and there's just the habit of indulging the flesh and not transcending it with love.
So I guess that goes into the subject that you had brought up, which is utilitarianism, and obviously there's got to be some kind of correlation with self-hate and utilitarianism. Can there be?
Well, if you want to. I mean, I'm not a big fan of utilitarianism as a philosophy. I've always taught it in college, and then I showed some of the flaws.
Can you summarize it quickly?
Really?
For these guys?
Well, utilitarianism basically, according to the structured philosophy, not just the fundamental impulse that everybody and everything is an instrument, but every action should be based upon, every action's moral quality and worth, which should be based upon its utility in the sense that it should reduce suffering and increase pleasure, but that it should do so for the greater good. And that makes it very vulnerable, because you could say that people with Down syndrome and other conditions that make them very unattractive should be simply eliminated. You could actually come up with that. I mean, they did that kind of thing in Germany
Right.
and in Italy. They
Right.
did away with malfunctioning beings. They,
Right.
you know.
So being is not sacred. The greater good is sacred, according to utilitarianism.
Yeah, but what is that? That's just some form that can be used by a vicious
Right.
political system,
Right.
and it has been. But I don't know where you want to go with the idea of utilitarianism. We could talk about it at great length. We could go back to Jeremy Bentham and all that, but that's not really necessary, in my opinion, for this. You can take every moral, everything that includes human consciousness, and therefore every moral system. You can go to it from this condition of existential anxiety that we're talking about. We live in such a condition of separativeness that anxiety is part and parcel of life, and we do everything we can to somehow supplant it, transcend it, or swallow it up, or stuff it down into a dark hole. We do everything, all kinds of things. All these human endeavors are dedicated to what? Closing gaps and being applauded. I mean, look at the world of the selfies. Look at the, I mean, really, how many selfies by now? Maybe a trillion? Think a trillion
It's
selfies?
incredible.
Got to be a trillion selfies that have been
It's
made.
got to be a new complex, a name.
Yeah, I
Right.
think as we get closer to artificial intelligence, it'll be one of the steps along the way, because they talk about it like that now. Some of the people like Musk, people like that, they say that we're already cyborgs.
Yeah, well,
So-
certainly
so-
we very rarely disconnect from our technology at this
Yeah.
point, and so therefore it's synergistic with our lives.
Right.
It's part of certainly what I go through on a daily basis. It's part of my work, whether it be calculating something or recording something or tracking data points on things. It's just part of all of it. And the claim was that our bandwidth is not as fast as a computer, so at some point we're just gonna switch over to something else. But the selfie thing certainly plays into what you had called out a long time ago with narcissism and the vampire myth. And I think the easiest way to understand that in layman's terms is that a lot of people have trouble with true self-reflection from an objective stance as opposed to from a condemning stance on themselves. And that is the disembodied state that you talk about often. So people are so disconnected from their feelings of themselves in the very moment that they throw an ideology out into the ether about where they should be and what they should be doing instead of feeling where they are and experiencing what they can.
This is an interesting thing. It's been something I've been looking at lately. The world of self-deceit. I learned about it in terms of language back in the 60s when I studied existentialism, because existentialism is supposed to be the enemy of self-deceit. And the term is used by people like Sartre and some of the others too. And there are various ways of being self-deceitful. The way that Sartre talked about it, if I remember right, he talked about the guy who's the waiter, and now he's reduced himself to being the waiter. And all his behaviors and actions are dedicated to that. And that's not what he really is. You see, you're the nothingness of consciousness. You're the pure emptiness of consciousness. But now you've objectified yourself. And that gives you a sense of belonging, and you don't have to feel the separation anxiety. There's a fundamental separation anxiety going on in us, according to some people. And some of us are more aware of it. And some people who can't lie to themselves about, like, maybe they see their flaws more easily than others would look at their own flaws. And you could say, well, that's because the person was made to feel guilty in the first place. Okay, so there's the positive side of the guilt complex. And the possibility of being honest with yourself. Then the whole point would be to get past all of it. to get past the guilt and get past the pride and get past the self-lying and the self-condemning, the whole thing, right? That would not be easy, but those are stages on the way for most people. So the beginning, in my opinion, would be to stop friggin' lying to yourself that you are perfect, because you don't say, oh, I'm not perfect, but then if you're ever assailed, you'll always make an excuse.
Right, so it's like perfect is like a shield so that they don't have to look at themselves.
Well, I'm imperfect, of course but don't you dare point out anything about me being imperfect.
Right.
And then there are the people who go professionally into that. I remember R.D. Laing writing about it, but I had written about it 10 years before I read it in him. And that is, you'll find people doing all kinds of commentary, like psychoanalysts in a clinic, and they will be the most harsh people in the world about themselves. But don't you ever dare say it to them first. Because the ego is found in the one who stands back making the judgment.
Right.
You see, I am the perfect one looking at this imperfect one. So there's a continuation of the split. Does that make sense? Is that worth listening to? Because that thing goes on too. People who just want to condemn themselves should not pat themselves on the back for being anything more. Don't pat yourself on the back for anything. Just keep walking straight ahead. Otherwise, you might fall off the... Well, I think we walk a tightrope.
On a high horse?
Wow. But at least a tightrope. And if you don't keep moving forward, you're going to have to go backward. If you stop, you're going to... Wouldn't it be harder to stand still on a tightrope?
Yeah, I believe so.
I would think so, right?
I haven't done it.
You haven't been crazy enough.
I've done a little slacklining and not much tightrope walking. What a difficult thing.
Well, does this make sense?
Yeah, I believe it does. And so, I mean, it all goes back to what we are consistently talking about, which is embodiment and being in the moment as opposed to projection of an ideological version of oneself, I suppose. Would that be a way of maybe not escaping, but maybe somewhat of a solution for the self-imposed problem of self-hate?
It's a way of walking on the broad path of the Tao. It's one more way. Let's do this with it, though. Let's not offer it up as the way, as people have to find their own. Krishnamurti would point this out if you read him in the right spot. All you have to do is to do what you do anyway, only intensify it, focus on it, make it more important. And that is what? Paying attention to yourself and to the other. You're doing that anyway. Now, I know I've been listening to a lot of Terence McKenna, and he would say, take psychedelics and you will really go for an advanced course in self-understanding.
Right, ayahuasca is becoming a very popular thing.
I guess so. That's all. I'm an old dog. I'm not be doing anything like that in my life, and I'm not recommending anything to anybody. All that I'm ever recommending is that whatever circumstances you're in, try to pay attention to yourself.
In what way? In what way specifically?
That's very important. You've got to understand that people think paying attention means you're suddenly going to have all control. So suppose that I'm having a difficult time in my life. I find my mind working as a result of it, and old programs will become stimulated and they will come out in a certain way. Suppose an individual, let's take an individual we don't know. He's got a deep-seated sense of being damaged in his early life. Let's make it that way. There's so many people like this. Damaged by a significant person, mother, father, okay, and therefore has like a big hole in his heart, okay. He doesn't feel complete, he never feels right, he can actually be getting out of the way of people, like when he drives or something like that, because there's that impulse, I'm not as important as this jackass doing 35 miles an hour over the speed limit is. I got to get out of the way. that kind of, I mean, he or she can be in that level of self-deprecation, self-abnegation. It's got all kinds of labels, terms for it, but you can just see it as an existential experience from moment to moment to moment, and you know that it has a background, and it will perpetuate itself. So, if a person sees that, most people will feel an injustice. That's where the paranoia comes in, where the defensiveness comes in, because you know that somehow deep inside you don't really deserve that. And people impose that on. I mean, the world has always been brutal. In the Roman time, there was no morality except power. If you had power, you were the moral one. How's that for right and wrong? Okay? You talk about benighted, that's the meaning of the word benighted, to have your mind in a dark place. Have your head in a place where the sun doesn't shine. I like to impose that image. And that's what it means to be benighted. And unfortunately, a lot of that still persists now, and it persists in the individual. And you can see where people, you'd say, that's a good person. He's looking at himself. He's very honest with himself. And yet, if you look at him and his attitude towards other people, he wants to have public whippings and stuff like that. You know what I mean? He's not going to be kind to anybody. This is part of the slaughterhouse of the world. Look at I hate to say it, this is a very dark video today, but if you're at all honest, you know the terrible things are going on right now in this world. What do we have, 7 billion? Almost 7?
It's gotta be, yeah, no, I think it's over 7 billion.
I thought it was because I heard McKenna talking about it, and he died a long time ago.
It's amazing how much the population's gone.
Yeah, and despite that, I read, I asked somebody to look it up, how many people die every day, and he looked it up, he said 6,000. I said, it can't be 6,000. Now, he's way better on the computer than I am, somebody we know. No, it's 6,000, right here, 6,000. Yeah, the United States, I meant the world.
Right.
155 to 158.
Right.
That was several years ago, it could probably be up now, because higher numbers, more incidents, and lots of bad stuff going on.
Well, number one, we call this podcast Shadow Works for a reason. We purposely shine our heads in places that have no light, so to look at it for what it is. But I was listening to Osho last night. It was hilarious.
He was a hilarious guy.
It's just a part of the process, though. Right?
Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, I don't really know. I haven't been there yet.
We like to say it's all an evolution of spirit. It's all going to come out great. All will be. It is all is well, and all will be well. That's from the high perennialism. But
the whole process of going down though might not be so fun.
As somebody who came to this work through existentialism because of the darkness that I saw. I mean, I came to Zen after existentialism. But as somebody who came through existentialism, yes, some existentialism will shine a light and say, no, boys and girls, this is not part of a great progress towards some kind of high dialectic, pure mind of Hegel. This is, as Simone de Beauvoir, Sartre's girlfriend, said, I used to go to the library in Paris and read Hegel all day, and my mind would be transported into the ether, my words, but her meaning. And then I would walk home, and I'd walk past the prostitutes selling themselves on the sidewalk, and the dog excrement in the gutter.
Right.
If you want to believe in the cult of the personality, if you want to believe in Stalin or Hitler or Mao Zedong or any of the other great heroes, if you want to believe in Buddha or Jesus, that they're all going to be, those personalities going to save you, and all you have to do is go back to sleep and say, yes, I believe, even though that is like writing on water inside yourself. I met a kid many years ago when I was in graduate school in Boston College. I was in the dorms, summer school, and it was for my master's in philosophy, and I met a guy who was one of the most awful users of all the people. There's nobody in the whole building who didn't know that he was a big phony, except himself. And he said, I'm saved, you know. It doesn't matter what I do, I'm saved. You know why? I believe. I have faith. You see that? Faith in what? I mean, somebody's going to save me, even though I'm just a user and a rat to everybody around me.
Mm-hmm.
I have no love except for myself. I'm a self-absorbed black hole, no light emitting from myself. So the words of 3 John, so correct. And I'm going to be saved because I mouth the words, I believe in you, Jesus.
Mm.
Wow. I think that if Jesus was still around, the guy that was there, he would probably want to kick him right in the ass.
Mm.
He may not do it, but he might say, I want to kick you in the ass. See, it's been distorted. I'm sorry, that's how I see it too. And you're going to find a whole bunch of people saying this, that's not what he was doing. He was not as the cult of the personality. Alan Watts openly says it. He knew himself to be what? Cosmic consciousness.
Mm.
That's what he was. That's not a person. That's so beyond anything of personhood. That's a vision of the whole cosmos with one eye, all beautiful. It's the vision of God, or whatever you want to call it.
Omniscient?
Well, you would be that during that moment.
Mm.
Some people have these experiences, and you can call them crazy if you want, but I would certainly like to be crazy like that.
Mm.
I recently listened to Terence McKenna address a question that was raised, and I think the guy, couldn't hear him exactly, but I think basically he was asking Terence McKenna if he was schizophrenic. Did you ever see that one?
No.
It's really worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said, yes, this of course, of course. He's the most brilliant, astute son of a gun, he was. I mean, a memory, and he was smoking weed every day, which is a killer of memory. It
Right.
clogs up the hippocampus, right? And yet his memory was spectacular, and he knew all about these arcane characters from antiquity, and he knew all kinds of things as if he has encyclopedic knowledge of a great many things, and he was entirely dedicated to crumbling the social structure that we believe in, and he's not the only one.
Mm.
He's not the only one, and I understand their point of view. I got it. I wouldn't practice it, especially at my age now, but I can understand it. I would not recommend it to anybody. You have to follow your own path.
Mm.
You know, whatever you do, try to wake up during the middle of it. And people say, what does that mean? I'm awake already.
Right.
As soon as you say that, you're not.
Well, the simplest way that you had taught to me many years ago was start with where you are, and you could focus on your breath, and you could focus on the weight of your own ass sitting in a seat if you're sitting.
Yep.
And start with that sensation, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you are your body. You don't have a body, you are the body.
Mm.
And if you want to deny that body, you have problems. But maybe the ultimate you is living in the void and is perfectly beyond all fear and suffering.
Mm.
And that may be true. You know, there are people, the Gnostics basically believe that you and I are spirits trapped in these very inferior material vortices that we call bodies.
So,
vortices of energy.
So let me address that really quickly. A lot of people talk about that they are spiritual beings that have a body.
Yeah. You don't have it. You live it. You live through it.
Experience is all of it. Though.
Yeah.
Like it's like you cannot be separate from all of it. In the same way that we can't be separate from the air that we breathe, and that becomes part of our body as we have learned to identify these things. in subsystems that interact with each other, but we are in coordination with the entire experience happening simultaneously. We're not separate from the sun. We may be distant from the sun, but certainly when the light shines outside, the sun gets to us.
That's the sun.
So it's like, where does one thing end and another begin? I was listening to Alan Watts talk about the idea of the atomic model of the universe last night. He broke it down piece by piece by piece, and you can throw identifications of separation out as ideas, but there is no separation. I even discussed this in fitness, in terms of fitness. People talk about pieces of the body, but if you teach yourself to identify structures of your own body as pieces, you become more and more frail over time because you move in pieces. And as a human animal, we move as an entire organism. We don't move in pieces. And so the more you isolate movement, the worse you become at movement. It's amazing. And I've experienced it to the point at which I've torn my body up. Right? But you have to, and as you were saying, like what we're talking about, sensation, if you become one with a movement, if you are it, all of it at once, things don't break down. You may have blind spots in that, and that's what coaches are for and things, but if you can fully experience the experience of lifting a weight repetitively, and you replicate the same positions over and over again, you train yourself to resist that pressure better and better over time. But it is a practice. It is like, if one can put themselves in the circumstance, you can create a meditative practice out of it and get multiple benefits out of it. Not just the narcissistic benefit of building one's own body and then looking in the mirror and criticizing oneself, and then caught in that endless loop of never going to be good enough because it's the first day you started lifting was the last day that you were satisfied with yourself. So I sometimes I have to perform a lot of lifting on my own for that reason, because it's too separate, too separative with myself and the thing that I'm doing. If I have other people around, I sometimes have to be in complete isolation in order to do it properly. It requires focus. And sometimes it's a social thing, and that's the purpose of it too.
Yeah, what have you done with all? You've come to various insights about the limitations and the foibles, like the failures of pushing yourself to become like the strongest and the biggest and the best.
It's so separate. I mean,
you've gone beyond it, right? Did you have that? Were you caught in that?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. The world's a wave, right? The world's a wave. So you have all these movements, these things happening, and you get caught in one wind and then another wind, and it's just, it is unavoidable. But if you can stand your ground in your essence, I suppose, in your essential self, then you won't be moved by it, by the world doing its thing as much. If you can basically stop giving a shit about what other people's judgments are and things, and your own judgments about yourself and where you should be and when you should be there and what you should be doing, and just feel things and do the best you can as one is inclined to do in, let's say, a strategy for executing a program. You know, I write programming for people. I write strategies for executing training, and you approach it with the best effort that you can, but it should have zero attachment to the outcome. Okay, this is what's on the agenda today, but take it one step at a time to get to that point. If you rush to it just to get through it, you betray the entire practice of what you're doing, and that will come back to bite you at some point. It will just be a function, and you will be separate from the function, which is not what humans are. We're meant to synergize. I think. I don't know.
I think we live a life of various values, and we're always reaching for something, and it's very often pleasure and comfort, and thus the workout becomes something you have to do in order to get some more pleasure. Like the guy works his ass off in order to look good, so he could become an attractive lounge lizard. Huh? And therefore, the workout is for the sake of his selling himself as a commodity. I remember one of the black belts, big guy, when we do. I remember him actually saying that he wanted to make himself the most appealing commodity he could for women. That's how young he was, and I bet he's still that age.
Right.
Because it's very hard to get past any of this unless you really go to school for it, and going to school starts with yourself. First of all, you got to stop lying. I haven't seen many guys from the dojo or many guys in the weight room who don't lie to themselves in various ways. I mean, so much authoritarian personality.
Absolutely.
And that's an immediate, idolatry is just a projection of your own powers onto somebody else.
Right.
So what I would want to do, that kind of thing, but I can't, so I love this one who does it. So it's an identification with the idol that he better always be good. It's like the baseball player, 3,000 hits. I don't care. What have you done for me lately? You struck out. Boo.
Right.
I mean, that's it. That's why.
Incredible.
Yeah, and that's why I like to throw this in, if you don't mind. You can maybe end it with this. In the 1978 World Series, the Yankee third baseman Greg Nettles made 5 or 6 or 7 spectacular plays at third base to virtually save many runs and to give the Yankees a victory. They had won in 6 games. Great team. The other team was a very, very good team too. If the balls had gone through, the games would have been entirely different. And so he was asked later on about the crowd's reaction to, did you know this?
I know already what you're going to say.
It's a great answer. It's my all-time favorite quote from a baseball player. With the fans' reaction to your marvelous fielding feats, he said, "The fans are horse shit. I play for my teammates and the players on the other team."